within regards to it. We're going to speak about Ecuador today. We spoke already about a number of South American countries. We touched upon Colombia and Peru in recent days, also Uruguay. So I thought it would be an opportune time to speak about the history of Ecuador, Jewish history. Not many people will talk about it. If you mention, the religion Judaism, Ecuador is not going to come, let's say, on the top of the list of vast majority of the people. Let's put it that way. Probably not even in maybe the top 30 countries, you would say. And so, but we are going to concentrate on that today. We'll try and get as much information as possible. But I hope this will be informative and good resource for anyone reading over here. Okay, so we've already recorded about 15 to 20 different countries we're trying to explore, and so this is now one of the first 20 countries we happen to be speaking about. I'm just recording this at the time of Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan. It happens to be a new Hebrew month today. And let's get this underway. So we know that the history of the Jewish community in Ecuador, it will go all the way back to the 1500s and the 1600s even, when there was the Sephardic Jewish community began arriving from Spain and Portugal, obviously as a result of the Spanish Inquisition that took place in the year 1492. Now, the Ecuadorian Jews, let's say, are members of a small Jewish community, obviously in today's territory of Ecuador, and they form one of the smallest Jewish communities in South America. So we spoke about the community of Uruguay only yesterday, and several other places, Colombia even. They had like modest to decent populations of Jewish people at some point in time, but Ecuador is much smaller. I think according to Wikipedia, the total population is 290 Jewish people, but it might be slightly more, slightly less. I did read somewhere else that maybe it's as much as 600, but it depends. What do we classify? Is someone culturally Jewish? Someone comes from Jewish descendants? So we don't know how really these censuses are actually calculated in of itself. So that's very interesting. Yehudut Ecuador, Ecuadorian Jews. So we call this, I think in Spanish, Judíos de Ecuador. Now the regions with let's say the significant Jewish populations is Kyoto and Goye y Cril. Those are the two places in of itself. Obviously languages will be Spanish, Ladino, Hebrew, and I think there'll be some Yiddish speakers also, because we're going to see in this class that people will come at the time period of the Holocaust. Many Ashkenazi Jews would actually come to Ecuador also at one stage in time. So as we said before, the first Jews began to arrive in Ecuador from around 1580 to about 1640. And actually this is when Spain and Portugal were united in the Iberian Union. It was King Philip II of Spain was only heir to the throne at that point in time. And during this time period, many Portuguese were, let's say, suspicious of their faith. So the Jewish people then began to enter the viceroyalty of Peru, a newly founded colony where Inquisition surveillance was weakened. I remember we recorded a video quite recently on the Jewish history of Peru. I think that was only 2 days ago we recorded that, which is quite interesting in of itself. Now, as a result of the Iberian Union, much of the Spanish America was ruled by one crown during this period of 60 years. During this time, the Portuguese would spread Christianity as it arrived at that point in time in the dominions of Spanish America. And the term Portuguese was synonymous with converted Jew. I think it was around the time period of approximately 1640. The union ended with the Portuguese will revolt against the Spanish monarchy, and the Duke of Braganza took the throne of the Kingdom of Portugal under the name of John. I think John IV, if I'm not mistaken, but that will have to be double checked. So that just some of the history going on. Now let's see the new Christians at that point in time in Spanish America. They would find, I think, no support from the inquisitorial regime and were forced to migrate to other regions of the Peruvian viceroyalty, especially to those where, let's say, the Inquisition did not have any counts. It's interesting. Hi, shalom everyone that's tuning in. We're actually recording a live. Hi, shalom everyone that's tuning in. We're actually recording a live video of the history of the Jewish community in Ecuador, which is very, very interesting at the moment, and we're going to speak about it because not many people know so much with regard to the country Ecuador in of itself. So That's very, very interesting. So we're on this special live edition over here today. Okay, so we're talking about the new Christians in Spanish America had no support from the Inquisition regime, and they were forced to migrate to other religions of the Peruvian viceroyalty, especially to those, let's say, where the Inquisition did not have any courts. The viceroyalty of Peru was extremely large, and the territory still contained large areas with little to no Inquisition presence. By avoiding, let's say, major urban centers, Jewish people labeled, let's say, as heretics over there could survive by camouflaging their personal and group identity. Thus began a pattern of new Christians settling in a viceroyalty of Peru, where they migrated from its center to, let's say, less populated and less controlled outer regions at that point in time. So very, very interesting. Okay, so let's continue. Now, there was, I believe, a relatively large number of migrants made their way towards the southern and northern parts, while audience of Quito. Now, within Quito, the new diaspora first headed into the interior of Juan Salinas and Loyola. They later transformed into township of a place called Loja, interesting enough, which, according to studies by Ricardo Ordonez Chirbago, was an important destination for many migrating Sephardim. Subsequently, many of these families migrated. They will migrate further to Cuenca, and then to the northmost township of Chimborazo or Aluso, or you could say Palatanga and Chimborazo, respectively, over here. They would continue the flight from the powerful and cruel inquisitional arm at that stage in time. Early Sephardic Jewish people likely arrived, say, let's say, in Cuenca and its nearby settlements towards the late 16th and early 17th centuries. But there's apparently evidence over here, according to Wikipedia, of additional waves of Jewish migration to the area in later times. It's possible that other Sephardim had been established in the colonial territory, and since early days of the Spanish conquest, suggests, let's say, by the presence of, obviously, of the names associated to it, with conquerors who arrived alongside, I think there was someone named Sebastian de Benalcázar and Pedro de Alvarado. So that's very, very interesting. Now, in the 17th century, landowners began to appear in Cuenca with surnames of uncertain origin, including Saavedra, Haddad, and Iglesias. Now, we know, I think, families like Haddad will become prominent Sephardic families, especially in Tunisia and in Yemen afterwards. Migrants also reached northern Peruvian Andes, as cultural, let's say, ethnic influences of the region were not yet defined by colonial boundaries to the extent they are today. Rather, let's say, this cultural historical unit traces back, let's say, to pre-Columbian times. Now, we recorded a video just, I think it was 2 days ago, yesterday, with regards to the history of Colombian Jewry over there. We really talked about that. Now, these circumstances will explain the Sephardic presence in the gold and commercial areas of Quito and Cali, such as Loja, Zaruma, Cuenca, Santa Isabel, Yungila, Tarqui, Chordeleg, and Sisig, as well as in other mountain passes or trade routes, towns between areas like Guayaquil and Quito, such as Alusi, Chapacoto, Chimbazri, St. Joseph, San Miguel de Chimborazo, Granado, as well as other areas in the northern highlands of Peru due to their proximity. The presence of Western Sephardic Jews, let's say in Ecuador, remained hidden for many, many years, as they often settled in, let's say, more remote villages and practiced Judaism in the secret of their house. Many of these crypto-Jews, I think, would still speak Ladino. Remember, Ladino was a popular language, especially in many of the Sephardic countries. Some say that there was a man named Antonio Jose de Sucre. He was a leader in the struggle for independence in South America and a hero of Ecuador, who served both as a president of let's say, I think, president of Peru and as president of Bolivia. Now, we spoke about Peru, and he is a descendant, reported, of these Jews. So I don't know much information about him per se, but that would be interesting if anyone can write a comment if you know anything about him. Now, certain families' names amongst established Ecuadorian families attest to their, in some case, crypto-Jewish Sephardic ancestry. However, prior to World War II, there was very little active Jewish migration to Ecuador, but we very much over here today are speaking about the Jewish community of Ecuador here in this special edition over here. So please, anyone tuning in, please like the video. Now, Sephardic names in Ecuador include Navon, wise, that means in Hebrew. Navon, another famous Sephardic family, I think that would branch out. Moreno, which means teacher. Gabbai, which means an official, like you've got a gabbai of a synagogue, for example. A shamash. Piedra is a stone. Franco become famous Sunday if it's connected, it means free. Amzalag is a jeweler. We've spoken about rabbis of the last Amzalag already. Saban, soap, for example. Espinosa, a thorn. Nagar is a carpenter. Haddad is a blacksmith. And Hakim is medic. So many of these family names we've actually learned before in this series that they happen to have been from, as I say, from rabbis in of itself. So let's explore a bit with regards to 20th century Ecuador over here. Now I think it was in the year 1904. It reports over there was only 4 recognized Jewish families in Ecuador. Wow, so you see how tiny and fragile it was actually, that place. And the 1917 survey indicated the presence of only 14 Jewish people in the country. Now, after the United States of America was established, its immigration quota system with the Immigration Act of 1924, a handful of more Jews would arrive in Ecuador. However, then mass Jewish immigration to Ecuador would only begin in the wake of the rise of Nazism and ensuing Holocaust in Europe. I think during the years 1933 to 1943, about 2,700 Jews would arrive, and come with the year 1945, there was now 3,000 new Jewish immigrants. 85% were refugees from Europe, so the vast majority of Jewish community there would definitely be Ashkenazic, without a doubt. Now, in the early years of the Second World War, Ecuador still admitted a certain number of immigrants. I think come 1939, it was, when several South American countries refused to accept the 165 Jewish refugees from Germany aboard the ship, I think it was a Going Stin at that point in time, Ecuador would grant them entry permits. Nevertheless, the country eventually gave way to a policy of selectivity. According to the policy, Jewish immigrants to Ecuador were supposed to be employed in agriculture, but the authorities soon surmised that immigrants were actually merchants, industrialists and businessmen. As a result, legislation was passed in 1938 which compelled any Jewish person not engaged in agriculture or industry to leave the country over here. In addition, entry rights were limited to only Jewish people who possessed a minimum of $400, when they would then be required to invest in an industrial project over here. Now let's talk a bit about 1935 and post-1935. I think the Comité pour l'étude de l'industrie de l'immigration dans la République de l'Équateur. I think English would call this Committee for the Study of the Immigration Industry of the Republic of Ecuador, was established in Paris by, I think, the French League for Jewish Colonization, with the purpose of creating a Jewish homeland in Ecuador, Australia, or in Suriname. An agreement was reached with the Ecuadorian government, I think, to transfer 500,000 acre of land to the committee's jurisdiction for a period of 30 years to be settled by immigrants, regardless of race, religion, or nationality. There were several consensus at that point in time were also promised, such as tax exemptions, for example, for 3 years, citizenship after 1 year, customs exemption, free transportation by train from the ports in the interior of the country. The president will also sign, I believe, the agreement several months later on the condition that a detailed program be presented by May 1937, and that the committee invest $8,000 and settle at least 100 families. Some Jewish organizations have found the land proposed for the plan unacceptable. I'm just reading from Wikipedia over here, claiming that it was too far from population centers and that the climate was too severe. These objections would result actually in a total abandonment of the project. Okay, so we see that it was actually a planned project, but it actually wouldn't happen at that stage in time. Okay, now following this attempt, I think there was another Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, I'm not sure from which continent, and HICEM, a merger of Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, the Jewish Colonization Association, and the Direct, which handled transportations throughout, let's say, European ports. And the latter German-based organisation, I think they would actually withdraw in the year 1935, this report's over. They would attempt to establish chicken farms, for immigrants in other areas of Ecuador, and 60 families will actually settle. But conditions, let's say, precluded any success in the venture, which ultimately failed. Most of the immigrants were businessmen and professionals, and let's just say these people were prepared to carry on their professions. Many Jewish craftsmen discovered that the native balsa wood was excellent for furniture craft and began production at that point in time. Later, these immigrants introduced iron and steel furniture to the Ecuadorian market, previously unknown to the country. They also developed retail stores and opened hotels. The success of many of these immigrants, however, caused, I think, some sort of tension among the Syrian and Cuban communities. We're interested to do a video on the Syrian Jewish history and Cuban Jewish history, who had previously controlled these industries. This will actually lead to pressure, led to anti-Jewish sentiment, but nothing more than substantial, let's just say. I think come with the year 1940, there were 3,000 Jewish people recorded in Ecuador, of whom the vast majority were refugees from Germany. And they worked in press, commerce, medical industries. They also established textile, pharmaceutical, and furniture factories. At its peak, I think in 1950, it was around that specific time period in itself, the Jewish population of Ecuador was estimated to have been 4,000 people. So now we're getting to a more modest figure, with the majority living in Quito. Several hundred also lived in Guayaquil, and several sources in Ambato, also in Riobana, and also in Cuenca. Very interesting stuff. Now, come with the year 1952, a law was passed requiring every foreigner to supply proof that they were engaged in the occupation stipulated in their entry visa. In response, I think at that point in time, the JWC, the World Jewish Congress, tried to help Jewish people who were practicing business, but were only allowed to engage in agricultural work according to their visas. However, attempts at agricultural settlement were unsuccessful at that point in time. So Ecuador's government policies regarding Jewish immigration are historically, I think, reported over here on Wikipedia, tentative and volatile. For example, I think it was in the year 1935, it gave the Jewish community permission to settle within an area of about 20,000 square kilometers. But I think come 1938, it issued an order that all Jewish residents working in areas other than agriculture, who were incapable, let's say, of developing the industry, would be required to leave the country. And to explore the Jewish community today. So according to one opinion here, just using Wikipedia once again as a source, only 290 Jewish people live in Ecuador today. The country's Jewish community, let's just say, is predominantly obviously of German origin, but the younger generation is largely Spanish speaking. The Ecuadorian Jewish community is a homogeneous group which has facilitated great communal organizations. I think, for example, there is an Association de Beneficencia Israeliti. What is that? That was founded in the year 1938. It's a central body for Jewish religious and cultural affairs of Ecuador. Now, there's other Jewish organizations in the country, include the Zionist Federation, which we spoke about yesterday in another video, B'nai B'rith, the Women's International Zionist Organization, also known as WISO, and Maccabi is also over there. The community also publishes bilingual Spanish-German bulletin called Informaciones. And in Ecuador, I think intermarriage is not a large problem as elsewhere, so it's probably a lower rate, since Jewish people form a separate middle starting between the upper, traditionally, let's say, maybe Catholic classes, and the lower classes of indigenous people. That's what's said over here in Wikipedia. There's a Jewish school, I think, or maybe associated, the Colegio Experimental Alberto Einstein, that was established in 1973, which serves both Jewish students and non-Jewish students from kindergarten to the 12th grade. The school celebrates Jewish holidays and teaches Hebrew and other Jewish studies. The school has reported over excellent reputation and offers a pre-college preparatory program reported over here. So that's very, very interesting. The Jewish community, let's just say, of Quito also has its own building, a home that, let's say, holds services on Shabbat and holidays also. That's what's reported over. Now, Ecuador itself, the country, has traditionally maintained friendly ties with Israel, frequently supported Israel in the United Nations. So that's definitely good to hear. The Ecuadorian embassy is in Tel Aviv, In the late 1960s, the two countries would develop over here a network of technical cooperation and assistance, particularly in the fields over here of agriculture and water development. And I think since 1948, 137 Ecuadorian Jews emigrated to Israel. That's what's reported over here. So that's very, very interesting. So okay, anyone that's tuning in at the moment, we are recording a video over here on the history of Ecuadorian Jewry. That's what we're recording at the moment. So please, everyone, join our community that's watching over here. We're recording this actually from the city of Bet Shemesh at the moment. So we appreciate any great feedback here at this stage in time. So that's interesting. So we're just going to ask a question here on the, let's just say on the channel, because we're doing a live video at the moment. I'm going to ask, if any of you happen to be from South America, just as a question, are any of you from South America? Because we've spoken about various rabbis from South America, and we've actually, this is the 5th video we're recording of the history of different countries, and today we're featuring obviously the country of so this is just a question over here. So we've asked a question, are any of you from South America over here, because we're speaking about the country Ecuador today here on this special edition. So please, anyone, answer, because it'll be great to hear from you over here. So thanks, I appreciate it. Okay, so let's continue now. Okay, so we talked about how Ecuador has maintained, great ties with Israel all throughout. I think since 1948, 137 Ecuadorian Jews have emigrated to Israel. So Aliyah is definitely something that is very, very prominent in Ecuador in the thing. Now, prominent Ecuadorian Jews, they've achieved prominence, let's just say, the Jewish community in various fields, including academics, industry, and science. There was someone named Beno Waisa, also known as Benjamin Varon, who was an active Ecuadorian journalist, later entered the Israeli diplomatic service, serving as various Latin American countries. Now, his brother Max Weiser was the first Israeli consul in Ecuador. There's another man now named Mosilio Schechter, who was a researcher involved in studying bacterial growth and cell division. Okay, let's say something about Mosilio Schechter. I couldn't find much of the history of any rabbinic scholars in Ecuador over here, which is a bit of a shame. But this Mosilio passed away quite recently here from time recording, about 2-3 months ago. He was born in the year 1928. He passed away August 14th in 2025. We're talking about about 2 months ago. He was an Italian-born American microbiologist. He was distinguished as a professor emeritus at the Tufts University and a professor at San Diego State University and the University of California in San Diego. He passed away, he was 97 years of age when he passed away, respectively. Okay, so let's speak a bit more about the Jewish and religious and cultural life of Ecuador. So we know it is quite diverse in general. Obviously, very, very small size. The communities, especially in Quito and Guayaquil, are Ashkenazic, and I do think they do have some Sephardic members over there inside the community who are active in the community. Now, the Jewish community of Quito was, I think, more conservative, let's just say, for many years, but more have come back now to Orthodox stream practice. Also, I think in Guayaquil, there's a Chabad Lubavitch also present in the country, which we'll speak about in the coming minutes. Now, there's something called the Jewish Educati. Now, I think it was in May 1973. A group of members of Israelite Association of Quito, which is now the Jewish community of Ecuador, founded a school with an education based on the constant pursuit of academic excellence, opening its doors to the youth without distinct of nationality over here or religious identity. Additionally, you could say, the goal within the framework, let's say, of their secular education concept was to develop studies of Hebrew and history of Israel. That was the plans over there, destined to better understanding of the millennia of Jewish culture over here. Now, we talked about Alberto Einstein Experimental Education Unit. Obviously, I think it's a more secular school. It's a Spanish-English bilingual educational institution with Hebrew and French teaching, and is recognized as one of the best schools in Ecuador. It's reported over to be excellent academic credentials and experience of its professionals. Now let's talk about the youth over there. Seemingly there's Jewish youth activity over there. For example, obviously with a very, very small sized Jewish community, there still is some small Jewish groups. There are still some Jewish youth groups over there, mostly under the auspices of the community. The Tnua Noah Hatzioni is one of them. They operate on the premises of the Jewish community of Quito, respectively, over there. So that's very, very interesting. I think within regards to Jewish media sphere, the Jewish community publishes a bilingual Spanish-German bulletin, and that is actually called the Informaciones over there. So that's very interesting. Now, we've spoken about their relations with Israel, Ecuador itself, just using the World Jewish Congress website over here as a resource. Now, Israel and Ecuador maintain full diplomatic bilateral relations, and it's been developed in all areas, let's say political, commercial, cooperation, culture, and defense also. Let's talk a bit more about the Sephardic history. We've really touched upon this over here. Now, we mentioned about before that the history of the Jewish community of Ecuador obviously dates back to the colonial period, with the first Sephardic Jews arriving in modern-day southern Ecuador. As we mentioned before, they escaped the Inquisition of the Viceroyalty of Lima between the late 16th and early 17th centuries. And we mentioned how they stayed hidden. And we mentioned about how the Ashkenazic Jewish immigrants arrived in Ecuador, especially in the late 1920s over there. And obviously with the rise of the Germans and the terrible Nazis, we saw what happened afterwards over there. And many Jewish immigrants who arrived before during the Second World War were admitted entry into Ecuador, and on the understanding, as mentioned before, that they'd be working in agricultural endeavors, but they had branched out into other professions. And we spoke about how the Jewish brought a revolutionized approach to technology, science, and the arts of Ecuador, and were generally quite economically successful, so really benefited the country from business sphere, let's just say. And it's actually interesting. Jewish life in Ecuador, I think, organized. How was it organized? In the Comunidad Judía del Ecuador, which is a central body for Jewish religious and cultural affairs of Quito. We also mentioned that how B'nai B'rith is working over there. We mentioned about, I think, the Jewish Women's Society that does important social work inside and outside the community. I think we called it WISO, if I'm not mistaken. There's also, I think, the Hatzioni movement we mentioned before is also under the flagship of Hanoa Hatzioni, which I think operates all over the world. I think they run a youth movement and representatives of the HIAS. Now it's interesting, there's a Keren Kayemet Yisrael, Jewish National Fund, and Keren HaYisod over here. Those are two also, let's just say, two important organizations that also, let's just say, they also very much operate over here. Now I'm going to write a poll over here because we're doing a live video, which we're going to do a question of which country should we speak about next over here, because we want to do which Jewish history video should we record next. We're doing a poll over here. Yeah, because at the moment we're trying to explore all the countries at the moment, and the Jewish history, what actually went on which country. So we've already recorded about Gibraltar, Afghanistan, Pakistan, already inside the series. We spoke about countries like, I think, Kosovo even, and we spoke about Malta. We've spoken about Colombia, Peru. We've spoken about Uruguay yesterday. So that's now the next question we're going to ask over here. So which Jewish history we should record next on which country? And so please give your vote, which we should do over here. Okay, so we've spoken about how there's different community life and different importances going on in those specific regions. They run a Keren Kayemet Yisrael, Jewish National Fund, and so on and so forth. I think the newish headquarters of the Jewish communities were inaugurated in the year 2000 in Quito, and in 2012 in an area called Guayaquil, which is very, very interesting enough. So that's That's very interesting. So we can say they each have different spaces for recreation and activities for its members, including, I think currently there's synagogue, there's youth centers, a mikveh for both men and women that have to be a ritual bath, which we've spoken about before. In addition, I think to large social areas, they include public pool for the development of events and community activities also over here. Now, what are the synagogues in Ecuador? So I wasn't able to get that much information with regards to it, but there are, I think, 3 to note, if I'm not mistaken. There's one called Sinagogo, Beit Midrash, at Comunidad del Ecuador in Quito, respectively. Looks like a very nice synagogue inside. I'm just looking at the picture as we speak. Now, another synagogue is called the Sinagogo Comunidad Judía del Ecuador, once again in Quito. Also, this synagogue has to be a lovely, lovely structure. Another synagogue, I think it's called the Interior of Singango Comunidad Judía del Ecuador. Also, another beautiful, let's just say, synagogue inside, just looking at the picture. Now, there's an excellent article on the Sephardic Jew website over here with regards to the history. It's actually titled over here, Reviving Sephardic Heritage, the Untold Story of Sephardic Jews of Ecuador. So they actually say on the outset of it, learn about the hidden legacy of Sephardic Jews in Ecuador and enduring influence on the country's heritage over here. So that's what the story says in itself. Now, I'm going to read over the article and bring a few other insights which maybe we didn't read already. Now, Ecuador, known for its vibrant Jewish culture and rich history, holds a lesser known but fascinating chapter in the story of Sephardic Jews. Obviously, we mentioned that the presence of Jewish community in Ecuador dates back to the 16th and 17th centuries, when I think Sephardic Jews began arriving from Spain and Portugal, obviously because of the Spanish Inquisition. The tale of resilience, secrecy, cultural survival reveals how deeply intertwined global Jewish history is with local traditions. Now, we spoke about the colonial and crypto Jews, their arrival over there obviously occurred during the tumultuous time in history. This would respectively, I think between the years 1580 to 1640, under Iberian Union Philip II of Spain ruled both Spain and Portugal, leading many Jewish people to migrate to the Viceroyalty of Peru, as I mentioned before. Anyone tuning in live, we're recording a live video of the history of Jewish community in Ecuador. So please like the video and also subscribe to the channel. We're coming near 7,500 subscribers. So please, if you could subscribe now to the channel, I really appreciate it. We've got great content. So we're talking about the country over here of Ecuador. So I think under Iberian Union, Philip II of Spain ruled both Spain and Portugal, which would lead many Jews to migrate to the Viceroyalty of Peru, where Inquisition surveillance was less stringent at that point in time. Within the vast territory, many new Christians, as conversos were called, found refuge in remote areas. Loja in particular emerged as an important destination for these migrants, as indicated by the studies of historians like someone named Ricardo Ordonez Chiriboga. It's a very, very interesting enough. Okay, so now in places like Loja, in Zaruma, in Cuenca, Sephardic settlers would preserve their tradition in secrecy over there. And despite the risks of persecution, they adhered to dietary laws, kashrut, maintained distinctive burial practices, and practiced endogamous marriages, all while outwardly conforming, let's just say, to Catholic norms. This hidden legacy was often passed down through generations, with many descendants still speaking Ladino and practicing ancient customs over here, which is very, very interesting. So, friends, everyone that's tuning in, we're recording the history of another South American country. We are speaking here today about Ecuador, the country Ecuador over here. So I'm going to ask a question, if any of you have come from Ecuador, just another one, or if anyone has visited South America. So that will be, I think, an intro. Actually, we'll ask a question in a few minutes. Anyone tuning in live, we're recording a live video on the history of Ecuador. Please subscribe to the channel and please like the video also. Please subscribe to the channel. Okay, now the 20th century, there was a shift in demographics, as mentioned before. This is what the Sephardic Q website talks about. Early 20th century, the Jewish community in Ecuador obviously was small. I talked about how in 1917 it will grow from 14 Jews And then approximately 2,700 Jewish refugees arrived in Ecuador, come with the year 1943, and the peak population was 4,000 Jewish people in the 1950s, obviously in Quito area respectively over here. Now Sephardic influence will then start to blend with Ashkenazic traditions from various backgrounds together in Ecuador, let's just say in of itself. And so we mentioned about how the community established businesses, textile factories, furniture craft using abundant local balsa wood. This period marks a significant chapter in the history of Jews in Ecuador, where they will navigate both opportunities and challenge in their new homeland, let's just say. And the Sephardic Q website now talks about modern recognition and research how in the, let's say, late 1900s, early 2000s, it marked a turning point in the recognition of Sephardic Jewish heritage in Ecuador. The country began to modernize and became more open to diverse religious practices. Let's say scholars and at that point in time. And descendants began to investigate and document their Jewish roots. There was an establishment over there at that stage in time of the Culture Center for Sephardic History in Loja in 2023, which would start to represent a significant step in acknowledging at that point in time and celebrating this rich heritage. And this center aims to preserve and promote the Jewish Spanish heritage of the region through research, exhibitions, and education programs. Very interesting enough. So that is a very good thing to ask. Anyone tuning in, we're recording a live video here of the country Ecuador, a Jewish history video over here. So that is that's very, very interesting. I want to start another question over here and just ask all you fantastic people if any of you actually do come from let's say from a Sephardic country in of itself. So that would be an interesting thing to state over, friends, over here. But we're just going to continue this video as we go on over here. I'm just going to take a short break. Hi, yeah, everyone. We're just on a live video at the moment of the history of Ecuadorian Jews at the moment. So we're just speaking about it. We're using a Sephardic U website over here within regards to just within regards to the history of Ecuadorian Jewry. We're going to ask the people out here if you are you Sephardi origin. Let me know, please. It's, I think, an interesting question because we like to explore on this channel the history of Sephardic Jews. So, hi, sorry everyone. Sorry, we're just asking a question over here. We're doing a live video at the moment of the history of Ecuador Jewry at the moment here in this in this special edition of it. So, to everyone tuning in, I'm going to ask another question over here, another question and answer. So let's see if we can do that at the moment. So the question is, once again, are you of Sephardi origin? Okay, anyone tuning in live, we're exploring the history of Ecuador country, the Jewish history over there. So please, everyone, I'm going to ask a question because we are a channel that likes to explore the history of Sephardic Jews in general. We're like an online encyclopedia within regards to this. So please answer me if anyone is watching live, and we're exploring about the history of Ecuadorian Jewry. Okay, modern. So we talk about the modern place in of itself. We talked about how in the late 1900s, early 2000s, it marked a turning point in recognition of Sephardic Jewish heritage in Ecuador, especially. The country modernized. There was more religious practices. Scholars, descendants began to investigate and document their Jewish roots. We spoke about how there was the establishment of the Cultural Center in Sephardic History in Loja in 2023, which represented a significant step in acknowledging and celebrating their rich heritage. We spoke about how the center preserves to promote Jewish Spanish heritage in of itself. Now, the prominent figures, let's say Sephardic figures, included Ricardo Ordonez and Gabriel Juan Maldonado. I think they had been instrumental, let's just say, in connecting modern families to their Sephardic ancestors. They would help illuminate the often hidden history of these communities. And there was an integration of Sephardic names, as I mentioned before, of Navon, Morano, Haddad, which are among the established Ecuadorian families, which served like a legacy or a testament to this legacy in of itself, respectively. Now, contemporary Jewish community and reviving the past. Now, as we mentioned today, the vast majority of the Jewish people living in Ecuador are of German origin. It's about 290 individuals. The community is characterized obviously by its strong organization, with institutions like, as I mentioned before, the Association des Beneficiaires Israélite serving as a central body for Jewish cultural affairs. Educational, we mentioned about the school Alberta Einstein Collegio Experimental in Quito, and this actually really does promote Jewish identity, I think, to both Jewish and non-Jewish students. And there's now more efforts being made to revive and celebrate Sephardic heritage, which obviously is gaining momentum. There's a cultural center for Sephardic history. It plays a huge role in this revival, and it serves, let's say, as a beacon for those interested in exploring and understanding their roots. Now, it's actually interesting. The story, the Sephardic Jew question over here, they actually conclude over here in their article that the story of the Sephardi Jews in Ecuador is a testament, obviously, to the resilience of people who, despite centuries of persecution and forced conversion, managed to keep their traditions alive, from secretive practices of crypto Jews in the colonial area, and how's it going? Good. And to the modern efforts to reclaim and celebrate this heritage. The narrative is one of perseverance and cultural endurance. I think as Ecuador, let's just say, continued to explore and celebrate its diverse historical influences, the Sephardic heritage remains a vital part of the nation's cultural tapestry. Through ongoing research, cultural initiatives, and efforts of dedicated individuals, the rich history of Sephardic Jews in Ecuador will be getting the recognition it deserves, respectively, over here. Now, one of the rabbis, I think, over there in Ecuador, the Jewish community of Ecuador, is someone named Rabbi Nir Koren, working in Ecuador, and OU Director of International Relations, someone named Shoshan Gori, I think concentrating on Latin America, will try, and he did a famous famous questionnaire with Rabbi Koren, respectively, to find out about the Jewish community within regards to their place in of itself. So I think Rabbi Nir Koren, working as a Comandera de Julia del Ecuador, the rabbi of it in itself, its congregation, let's just say, and a community organization in Quito known as a community. He was originally a lawyer, I believe, who speaks Spanish, English, and Hebrew fluently. And at the time of this questionnaire which he gave, he was in his mid-30s. He was actually he's originally from Israel, and his wife is Rabbinit Andrea, an Argentinian. And he has spent his rabbinic career strengthening small Spanish-speaking Jewish communities around the world before arriving in Ecuador. Very interesting enough. I think they would lead communities in Colombia and in Mexico, interesting enough, over there. So they asked questions, I think, very much connected to, he was very much connected to the famous All Torah Stone Strauss Amiel program in Israel. It's a program where other people, I personally know of people that would be part of this program, where they sent people out all over the world to work as rabbis. So the program, I think, in itself is a commitment of training rabbis to effectively strengthen Jewish identity and existence in communities throughout the diaspora. And I think they will go to the Monterrey Jewish community over there, and then to Cancun later on, if I'm not mistaken. And they would serve in Colombia for some time, and they would eventually get connected through the Strauss Amiel program to the position in Ecuador, respectively. And so it's actually quite interesting. He talks about, inside this interview, how Quito has an amazing Jewish community, he will say it. Now, the people are trying to grow spiritually. Apparently there was a mezuzah project that was launched in recent times, and this actually gave him the opportunity itself to enter people's, to speak to people, let's just say, and spend more time visiting people and be a window to that obviously important mitzvah, and listening to the people's stories over there to hear about. It seems like a very hands-on and the people's rabbi, and it's very interesting how he tries to make it in a very comfortable way in of itself. I think also another project he would start is the Talmud Torah project. I think 1 day a week, respectively, where children come to the community center after school and study Torah, and they start offering Talmudic shiurim on the Gemara for men. That's another thing. I'm not too sure if it's Daf Yomi one per se, but that's interesting. And I don't think he reports over that he doesn't. They don't pray in the community center during the week, but they pray in people's homes during the week and circulate among the community members every day at a different location. praying, eating delicious breakfast together, studying Jewish law, halacha, for 5 minutes, and the halachot of reading the Torah, aliyot the Torah, and they also started a youth movement, reported over. So the question was posed to Rabbi Koren, I believe, why use different houses as opposed to a community center for davening? So when someone offers his house as a place to pray, this is what he says, he has to obviously show up over there, make sure there's a minyan, and calls his friends and neighbors, so it becomes more personal, let's just say, this minyan in of itself. So it's a very good idea. And when people usually come, the minyan, the prayer minyan happens to be in someone's house, some more people might actually come and attend the synagogue in of itself. So he's also, I think the question was posed to Rabbi Gaori, or I'm not sure, maybe he asked it. The question was posed, what does Ecuadorian Jewish community need right now? That was a question posed over here. So stated over, the answer was that it's a small, I'm not so sure if Rabbi Gaori asks this or Rabbi Koren asks this, but this is one of the questions posed and answered. It's a small, let's say more isolated community. And one suggestion was to connect to the largest Jewish world, let's just say. Doing outreach work he was doing previously in Chile, I think in Ecuador over there. There was a supported by Friedbergs over there. And this gave the Chilean Jewry a bond with North American Jewry over there. Because many, let's say, would come to Chile from Canada, United States of America, had heard of the famous Friedbergs apparently. And let's just say Ecuadorian Jews need to feel part of something bigger. So one of the ambitions, I don't know if this was actually done at the end, was to bring students from Chile, for example, to spend Shabbat with 30 students from Ecuador. That was one of the ideas. I don't know if this went to fruition. It's just a suggestion. And that will put the Ecuadorian Jewish community more on the map. And give the small community a spiritual boost. That might be one of the ideas that went on over there. And so they actually talk about how there's like maybe NCSYs all over the world, how they brought it to Chile, and maybe something like an NCSY was put on the map. It would give this small Jewish community a spiritual boost also. And he would also, one of the suggestions he would actually like to do was to bring North American Orthodox Jews to tour the Galapagos Islands and mainland of Ecuador. This would, let's say, in his idea, in his mind, would not just be an opportunity to see a beautiful country on South America's west coast. It would be a way to establish a stronger relationship, let's just say, between world Jewry and Ecuadorian Jewish community also, respectively, over here. So that's another interesting thing. Now, it's interesting. They asked an interesting question inside this questionnaire. How do you say kosher in Spanish over here? South Americans booming kosher food, let's just say, industry. Now, I think the OU Kosher itself, Orthodox Union, they actually supervise nearly 600 plants in Central and South America, and has a significant presence, the Orthodox Union, in South America, certifying products including olives, olive oil, dried fruits, quinoa and fish, especially tuna, let's say for example, and salmon. Now the South American kosher market is growing since kosher market of the world is growing, obviously. And I think there's a rabbi named Rabbi Yitzhak Gutterman who works who works for the OU Kosher Department, Regional Director of South America Operations. Now companies in South America are attracted to kashrut because they know that US companies demand kosher certification. And since kosher market, let's just say, in the United States of America is huge, these companies seek out the Orthodox Union presence in South America. So they are nearly in every country in South America, Rabbi Gutterman actually points out. So he actually stresses that the Orthodox Union itself works hand in hand with governmental agencies in South America, in countries, let's say, rich of opportunity. I think come November 2017, the Ecuadorian government invited Orthodox Union kosher representatives to speak at an agricultural event in an effort, let's just say, to help advance the country's economy. Now, the government even offered subsidizes a percentage of the, let's say, towards obtaining OU kosher certification. I think in South America, the Orthodox Union, they work hard to forge close relationships with local rabbis and communities. They will help in assisting with local to enhance their own kashrut certification and make more kosher food accessible on a local level. I think OU Kosher is not just about certifying companies. Rabbi Gutterman actually says it's about building and strengthening Jewish life all over the world. Very, very interesting. Now, let's say a bit more within regards to Rabbi and about Rabbi Koren itself from Quito. And Rabbi Nir and Andy have been serving as a rabbi and rabbinate Rebbitzin of Quito, Ecuador, for several years, coming from the All Torah Stone website over here, where they actually worked in Monterrey, Mexico, I think for 2 years. They worked in Cancun in Mexico for 2 years, and in Cali in Colombia for 2 years. A very, very well-traveled couple they happen to be. They also have a questionnaire, the All Torah Stone, over there. That they say that there's about 500 active community members over there, which is more than the 290, which is suggested overall. Obviously, there's synagogue activity, offices, sport courts. There's a mikveh, ritual bath over there, Talmud Torah, youth movement, and obviously the rabbinic couple will be responsible for Jewish religious and educational life over there, including the Talmud Torah over there, which is, I think, for education services for all ages over there. Mikveh management, obviously, these are big issues, events for holidays, Jewish holidays, Rosh Chodesh activities. They do, especially, I think, also Rosh Chodesh activities for women, in guidance operation in all events, where they will actually help with all Jewish life cycle events, such as weddings, chatanot, brit milahs, Jewish circumcisions, and much more in of itself. They talk about also in this questionnaire with the author about the Strauss Annual Educational and Mystery Training Program and the Claudia Cohen Women Educator Institute. So I would assume the rabbinate, the Rebbitzin, would have been educated in, let's say, in outreach or, let's say, Jewish education for worldwide in this Claudia Cohen Women Educator Institute. So they've been working in shlichot, obviously, around the world in several countries, in Spanish-speaking countries. So when they were asked, they said that preparing for the shlichut itself was, for them personally, a match made in heaven over there, with each community with an eye towards identifying what suits them and what suits us kind of approach, providing ongoing guidance and support, and most importantly, the feeling of being on a mission and knowing that we are not alone and that we have someone to call when needed. They also say over here, knowing that we are part of an organization of shlichim working around the world that actually empowers the organization to work in a small community. That's what they were given the tools to do this, and it also gives a feeling that they're part of something bigger also over here. So that's very, very interesting. Now, there's also Chabad, as we said before, I think in Ecuador. I think March 2004, Rabbi Tomer and Rebbitzin Rivka Rotem will be the rabbinic Chabad couple over there. They will come into March 2004, and they were mysteries, I think, obviously, of Chabad. That's the famous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Menachem Mendel Schneerson. Now, they said themselves that the Jewish community, or the Chabad website, obviously is concentrated in two cities of Quetta and Guayaquil, and obviously the population, as mentioned before, is a few hundred families. Now, I think the Chabad house in Ecuador has said itself the goal of setting the basis of an active Jewish life and make material and spiritual good deeds. It stated over that Chabad Ecuador enthusiastically offers an authentic Judaism to every Jewish person, brings people closer to people and to God, let's say in a pleasant manner, and stresses the importance of Judaism's original qualities. And they take place obviously in the two main cities, Quito and Guayaquil. They also offer a Beit Chabad. This is kosher product services in Beit Chabad. Lodging for Shabbat and holidays. Very interesting. We know that Chabad do a lot of excellent work all over the world. There's a synagogue, a Chabad-based synagogue. There's a library, important having Jewish books, and also kosher food services, respectively. So that is in the Quito, I think, Ecuador area in of itself. So very, very interesting. So we spoke about the modern Jewish community also with regards to it. We spoke about the maybe famous historians of Ecuador and the demography in of itself already in this class. Now, obviously nowadays, we spoke about how it was of a German origin because of the influx of the many German Jews came in the 1930s, respectively. But mostly young people are of a Spanish-speaking environment, culture in of itself. And we mentioned already about the association, the Beneficia Israelita, which was founded in 1938 in itself. So just to recap, there's many organizations, Zionist Federation there's a B'nai B'rith, there's a WISO, there's a Maccabi, there's a bilingual Spanish-German bulletin, for example. They are blended in well in the community, but kept their own things. They've got the famous Correggio Experimental Alberto Einstein School over there, which has been now running for 52 years, which practices the Jewish holidays and it serves both the Jewish and non-Jewish communities in itself. It's known as one of the best schools in Ecuador, if I'm not mistaken, and also the country itself has very good relations with Israel, which is also another important feature that we have to speak about also. So very, very interesting. And I think just to add on, there's other very tiny communities I've been in, also in Obaba, in Ambato and Koeka, also, which is very, very interesting to speak about and to say about over here. So I think we're going to leave it over here. Friends, everyone that watched, thank you very much. We're exploring the history of the countries of all across the world internationally. We spoke about Ecuador today. We've already recorded about Peru, Colombia. Already from South America, we spoke about Uruguay yesterday inside this series. So we're trying to go all over the countries across the world. We spoke about Gibraltar already. We spoke about Kosovo. We're trying to explore what was mainly also speak about the Sephardic community life in these countries respectively, and explore much more as a historical, let's say, an online encyclopedia, really trying to serve everyone over here. So thanks everyone for watching. And once again, asking everyone that's watching, please subscribe to the channel and watch this space for more excellent Jewish wisdom content and historical content. So wishing you a great day, recording this from the city of Bet Shemesh. Thank you very much for watching.